Please welcome the Honourable John Baird.
Good to be with you, man. Thanks for having me.
How are things? Good. I mean, there's just so much going on in your department right now.
It's a lot of work.
You've been very effective at jumping from department to department, and building up quite the experience.
You can't keep a job.
Yeah, you can't keep a job. That's one way to look at it. Or you're interested in personal development. You know, when you look back over the time, I mean, this has been a government that's not. For the longest time, it was the government trying to get in. The Prime Minister said when you guys became government, the West wanted in. Now it's established. This is established. When you look back at the last handful of years, what do you make of the run?
You know, we've had a great 8 years. We've been able to accomplish a lot. A lot of middle-class families are paying less taxes. They're able to have more freedom to decide what they do with their own pay that they've worked hard for. On foreign policy, I think we've pursued a principle-based foreign policy, reestablished a more activist agenda on the world, which I think is a good thing.
Activist.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who say that the form of activism in the environmental space, the Conservative government hasn't exactly been a friend.
We've certainly had strong policies. You know, listen, over the last 8 years, we've increased the number of protected areas in Canada by 40%, and that's not bad for one Prime Minister to increase it by 40%. We're actually GHG emissions, instead of going up, are actually going down. Not by as much as anything we'd like, but we're going to keep focused.
Well, we seem to be in an era of politics as sport, and your government's been exceptionally good at it. In terms of, like, it's about, we've had Tony Clement in the chair talking about how...
I think you're going to a sporting job.
I'm going to a sporting job.
Can I introduce something?
I'm going to a cultural job.
Yes. Hey, I've got a gift for you.
It's in a blue bag. Is that
It's in a blue bag.
Okay.
It's a recycling bag.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And it's a John Baird recycle bag.
Member of Parliament.
And I understand you're going to Hockey Night in Canada.
Yes, yes.
So you've got to learn about hockey.
Uh-huh.
So I brought with you a great book on hockey history. Written by a great man.
Written by your boss.
It's autographed to George. Congratulations on the Hockey Night in Canada gig. There's one thing for you.
Stephen J. Harper, the Prime Minister of Canada.
Absolutely. Then you get a Stephen Harper signed hockey puck. And
Can you tell, listen, as much as and I'm very appreciative of this, you should tell him that he should hand deliver this when he sits in the red chair.
Absolutely.
That's what he should be doing, you know?
Now, I know that the current host likes to wear big, thick, flashy ties. Yeah. I think you're more of a thin tie guy.
That's true.
So there you go. There's a nice flowery tie, pretty wild, just for you. Doesn't he look good in that?
No, can you imagine?
There you go.
That is very kind of you. Thank you so much.
Gifts.
Okay, now it's my turn to give you a gift. You ready for this one? If you don't believe that this guy's been committed to politics for a long time, look at this. But look in the background.
Atkins, you've had successful campaigns for Bill Davis in Ontario and now a successful campaign for Brian Mulroney. Did you expect to make such a breakthrough, especially in Quebec?
Well, I knew that we were going to make a breakthrough.
It's incredible, man. The Brian Mulroney first win, right?
I haven't seen that before.
Yeah, that's you. I think you were 15 at that time.
Yeah.
The first Brian Mulroney win, and it was on the subject of
Quebec. You can see I played a very key and instrumental role.
You really did. Well, listen, I love when people get engaged in politics very early, but the one thing that does concern me about it in some way is I'm always worried about ideologues. I'm always worried about people who join a party when they're kids, and then they just become just about the party, as opposed to recognizing that, and this has been one of the criticisms of the government, is that when they became the Prime Minister of Canada, the government of Canada, they still only represented the Conservatives as opposed to Canada. What has been your evolution in being more than just a guy as a member of this party?
Well, I think when you're a political activist, obviously, someone who you agree with has values and principles, and someone who you perhaps disagree with is ideological. Right. But when you get into government and you have to represent people when you're elected, but particularly as a minister, when you have to deal with challenges, it forces you to be a little bit more practical than you might otherwise have thought. At the same time, I don't think values and principles are a bad thing. Some core views, some core values that you hold that help inform how you tackle public policy challenges.
Much has been made about and we've talked about on our show too, about your presentation skills. Some have said it in a charming way you're a bulldog, some in a not charming way you're a bulldog, depending on how you look at it. But behind the scenes, you've been a very effective parliamentarian.
You know, we all have a role to play. I mean, if you get up in the House of Commons and say that I'm a dirty, rotten scoundrel, yeah, I'm going to respond in kind. At the same time, if people ask intelligent questions, they get intelligent answers. Mm-hmm. And I actually like working with people in other parties.
Here's when we talk about accountability, the current government and public service has achieved record lows with respect to budget transparency. We need to reverse the trend line. That's a huge statement. I think Kevin Page made that statement. But talk about accountability in practical terms, because it is a government that campaigned on accountability, but there's been much between the muzzling of scientists, as some have phrased it, some just say controlling scientists, to messaging. to this kind of stuff. Do you feel like you've lived up to the accountability standards you asked for?
Well, listen, I think you always can do better. I think we've raised the bar considerably. Let me tell you a few areas. No longer does big money play any big role in Canadian politics. You know, Jean Chrétien started it, but Stephen Harper took it all the way. There's no $5,000 cocktail parties anymore, and no unions and corporations donating money to political parties. You know, as a federal MP, I have to spend very little time raising money because we can spend it focusing on our jobs. In the United States, there are senators and congressmen who literally have to spend 25, 30% of their time raising money, and we don't have to do that in Canada. We've taken the influence of big money out of politics. Now, as Environment Minister, I had to go to Calgary and sit down with 10 oil executives. You tell me that meeting wouldn't be different if each of those oil executives were donating $100,000 a year to the governing party every year. You bet your boots would be a lot different.
And it would make a difference for the politician then?
Absolutely.
It would? So
we've expanded the access to information laws to more organizations than it's ever been done before.
So we've say that it's harder to get access to information, though.
Well, we've expanded the number of agencies. You know, for example, the CBC now is covered by the Act.
You shot the CBC one favor. Look at you guys. Stick around, more with John Baird right after this. This is great. Well, that's funny. Thank you. He's the foreign minister. But what could be the next step for John Baird? And could it involve a bigger job?
Hi, John. Surprise! Every teacher has fond memories of their years in the classroom and those students who stand out, and you are certainly one of mine. Now, as a member of Parliament, I've observed your strong work ethic and your commitment to public service.
That's the teacher K, right? Miss Stanley?
Mrs. Stanley.
Mrs. Stanley.
Grade 7.
Getting people involved in...
She was actually the first campaign I worked on. She ran for the Conservative nomination in the PN. Right. Unfortunately, didn't make it, but it was my first campaign that I worked on when I was a kid.
What do you do internally when you see the party starting to...
Do you know what? I mean, every government has its challenges. I'd always like to be criticized for what I'm doing than for not doing anything. You know, I think we all just get up every day and work on how do we push the ball forward. Obviously, jobs in the economy, economic growth are big priorities. As foreign minister, my job is to fight for Canadian values, Canadian interests around the world. And it's a great job. You just get up every day and you work hard to push the ball forward.
How do you choose when to get involved? How do you look at Ukraine and say, we're going to do this, Darfur, we can't do this, Libya, we will do this, Afghanistan, we can only do this? How do you make that call? It's
a challenging one, there's no doubt about it. We try to work with close friends and allies. Increasingly, no country can get its way in the world. You have to work together, whether it's on supporting the World Food Program, helping refugees Syrian refugees in Jordan, or whether it's standing up for liberal democratic values in Eastern Europe with Ukraine. You just look for opportunities where you can make a difference. The difference with Canada is we generally play everywhere. Not everywhere in every continent, but we're active all over the world, and that's something I think Canadians expect.
Do you want to be the leader of this Conservative Party at one point?
You're going to say leader of the opposition.
No. Well,
I'm happy with the job now.
I'm sure
you do a great job.
It's a good answer. I have to ask it again, though. When you look at the fact that we just
I am not one of these people who, from an early age, from the age 13 up, aspired to be the Prime Minister of Canada.
Wasn't your story?
No, I've always wanted, actually I had two goals when I was young, when I wanted to get into politics. I wanted to be a member of provincial parliament, and I wanted to be a provincial cabinet minister, and that came...
under Mike Harris, right?
That came true under Mike Harris by the time I was 30, so I sort of think I'm in a different place in my career where I can just get up every day and try to make a big difference, not trying to prove anything, just trying to do a good job for my constituents and my country.
Least of all to yourself, you peaked so early, at 30, right? Thanks for taking the time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. There you go. Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Honourable John Baird. I'll be right back.